Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 script with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to speak about each weapon, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get here. So for our first weapon, we got an Aristocrat's Light Machine Gun with plus 25% damage while aiming and 15% faster reload. So this is actually a very solid weapon right here. I don't know if it's quite God roll, but it is very close. The Aristocrat's effect is, in my opinion, probably the best first star for full health players. Anti-armor and junkies both compete with it, but I'm not the type of player to use a lot of chems, so I don't get as much benefit out of the junkies effect as a player who does use a lot of chems for their characters is. And the anti-armor effect, it really has varying effectiveness depending on the type of weapon. If you're wearing heavy or power armor with the stabilized perk, then you're already getting pretty solid armor penetration, so that means that the anti-armor effect is going to be less useful than it otherwise would, although it's still going to be very good. But that, in my opinion, means that Aristocrats really is the best first star for full health builds, in my opinion. And then plus 25% damage while aiming, that's very good on a heavy gun. You're typically not going to be using VATS with a heavy gun, at least not exclusively, because you're just going to chew through your AP very, very quickly. So typically, most players will either hip fire or aim it down the sights, and if you're the type of player like me, I tend to aim them down the sights when I'm using heavy guns, then that's just 25% free damage right there. And the 15% faster reload, that's actually especially good on the light machine gun, because as heavy guns go, the light machine gun actually has a relatively small clip, or magazine, sorry, but that is a little bit offset by the faster reload, so that's very much a good thing. So overall, this is a very good weapon right here. I would potentially expect to see this one in a weapon spotlight video at some point in the future. So yeah, this one's a good one. Let's go on ahead and see what else we get. And here we've got a Furious Tesla rifle with plus 25% damage while aiming and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Furious effect is not one of my favorites, although it could be actually pretty good on a Tesla rifle, although, at least if you made it automatic, but the problem with that is that you're going to get a maximum of 15 rounds in the weapon, so in the magazine. So that is a big drawback when you have to hit the enemy 10 times or so before you get the full benefit from Furious, but you can release those shots very quickly with the Tesla even without the faster fire rate on the weapon. So that's a good thing, but the first star is, I'd call it pretty mediocre on this weapon. It's not bad, but it's definitely not the first star that I'd really want on here. The plus 25% damage while aiming, for a non-quad version of the Tesla rifle, that's probably very good, although even though I tend to aim down sights when I'm not using VATS, the Tesla rifle is a weapon that I actually tend to hip fire a lot. I tend to use the Teslas in the daily ops when the enemies are invisible, so that I can just kind of run around spamming the trigger and use the damage numbers to figure out where the enemies are. So the 25% damage while aiming, while a very good second star, I wouldn't get nearly as much use out of it, but again, if you're the type of player who does aim down the sights with your Teslas, then that's a very good second star for it. The 25% less VATS AP cost is an excellent third star, but this really isn't the weapon I would want it on. Because as a heavy VATS user, I really don't use the Tesla in VATS. The primary benefit is you don't have to aim, you just kind of aim in the general direction, hit the wall, hit the floor, whatever, and you can even shoot around corners by hitting the wall and letting it arc to the enemy behind the wall that's hidden from them. So anyway, the 25% less VATS AP cost is just not really the third star I want on this weapon. So this weapon's not bad, but it's pretty middling in my opinion. It'll probably end up going back to the Scrip machines. So let's see what else we get. Alright, things are moving downhill steadily. Here we've got a Ghoul Slayer's crossbow with 25% damage while aiming. That's seeing a lot of that today so far. And then your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Ghoul Slayer's effect is probably one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects in my opinion, just because typically a ghoul is going to go down quickly enough with even a non-legendary weapon that you don't really need a whole bunch of extra damage to put ghouls down quickly. And I also don't think it's really worth keeping a special weapon around just to kill ghouls, even though ghouls are one of the regular targets if you're running the White Spring Golf Club or the Charleston Capitol Building or the Burrows or places like that for grinding XP and such. That's probably happening less now than it used to be, thanks to the fact that West Tech is instanced now, but it probably still happens some. I know I do a little bit at least. The plus 25% damage while aiming, I'm not going to beat this horse into the ground here, but it's very good. Probably the best star on this weapon, in my opinion, because the crossbow is definitely something that you can aim down sights. I'd probably use VATS with it, so I probably wouldn't get a whole lot out of it, but I know there are players out there who would prefer to aim a weapon like this down sights, like a sniper weapon, so getting that extra damage, nothing to complain about. And then the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. Unfortunately, that does not synergize well with the second star because you're either going to be getting the 25% damage bonus from aiming, or your VATS critical meter is going to be filling faster if you're using VATS. But you can't have both at the same time. Now, there is something to be said for a weapon having versatility, but in my opinion, I think you're better off keeping a weapon around that is more focused on your playstyle, and if you like to switch between playstyles, just keep a weapon around for each playstyle and switch when you feel like switching. So, you know, your mileage may vary, but that's my opinion on the matter there. So, that's not to say that, you know, you shouldn't ever aim down the sights or hip fire if you're got a VAT spec weapon or the other way around, just that you should generally stick towards the playstyle for the weapon. But again, your mileage may vary. And so let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This one's not exciting. And here we've got an Executioner's short 10mm submachine gun with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and plus 1 perception. So the Executioner's effect is, in the right situation, one of the better first stars in the game. Its plus 50% damage, unlike the other legendary effects, is actually multiplicative, meaning that the damage number that you see on the damage card is actually what you're going to get plus 50% of, even if you have increased that damage through perks or chems or mutations or whatever else you can think of there. So that's a very good thing. That makes it a very powerful effect. Its major drawback, of course, that it doesn't do anything at all until the target is at 40% or lower health. I guess it's actually below 40% health, so 39% or lower. So that's a big drawback, meaning that in a lot of cases, you're not going to see a lot of benefit from the Executioner's effect from daily farming when you're just killing, you know, ghouls and, you know, maybe even super mutants. You might save a bullet or two from super mutants, but you're not going to see a lot of benefit from it. But you will see more benefit from it on larger enemies such as the behemoths or Mirelurk queens or, of course, the endgame bosses once they get down below that 40%. So, like I say, it's very situational, but in the right situation, it is a very powerful first star. The second star, VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage, that's actually one of my favorite second stars in the game, and this is a solid weapon for that second star. One of the big benefits of that second star is that criticals they actually bypass the 70% damage reduction on the Scorch Beast Queen, and I don't remember what Earl's is. I think it's actually over 70%, and that's all right off the top before factoring in their armor or damage resistance or energy resistance or what have you. So the criticals actually bypass that, which can give some pretty insane critical damage when you've got the plus 50% damage. I have a bloodied plus 50% crit damage handmade that I tend to use on my commando as my main weapon, and I see some very high crit damage numbers on endgame bosses, and it's really nice. The plus 1 perception It's not the best third star by any means, but it's, nothing to complain about. Its primary benefit is that it gives you a little bit of extra VATS accuracy, which does synergize very well with the second star there. So overall, this one's pretty solid. I wouldn't call it anywhere near a god roll like the first like that light machine gun that we got on the first roll was. I don't know if it's fully a god roll, but it's very close. This one is quite a bit further from god roll than that one. So let's go on ahead and see what we get next. Alright, and we're sticking with the plus 25% damage while aiming. We got two-shot Western Revolver with the 25% damage while aiming and plus 1 perception. So the two-shot effect is not one of my favorite effects just because, well, for a couple of reasons. The first is that it adds 25% damage to the weapon, or I believe it's 25. It's either that or 20, but I believe it is 25. So that the weapon does 125% base damage, and you don't have to give up anything other than, some accuracy and some damage. And by that I mean that the damage that it adds is split across 2 rounds every time you pull the trigger. So each round is doing 62.5 or whatever percentage of the weapon's actual damage that you see on the card. And then each one of those shots actually has to penetrate the damage resistance or energy resistance or what have you independently. So you basically, their armor applies twice, which is a big drawback. And also, lower damage is more affected by armor. Higher damage gets through armor easier in this game just by virtue of the way the calculations work. So that makes it even worse by the fact that you're actually cutting the damage down. So there's a lot to dislike about that. And then beyond that, still, there's also a significant accuracy penalty for two-shot. And if you're using VATS, you'll frequently see the two-shot weapons just kind of both shots fly off in opposite directions and never hit your target. So, yeah, really not a fan of the two-shot. It does do well with explosive weapons, but this is not an explosive weapon, so yeah. The plus 25% damage while aiming is probably the best star on this weapon. Although, really, in my opinion, if you're going to be using a Western Revolver, your best bet is to use VATS because you're really going to want some extra damage from targeting weak points and getting some VATS criticals. So, your mileage may vary, but that's my thoughts on the matter. And then the plus 1 perception, again, that's not terribly exciting, not horrible, gives you some more VATS accuracy, but it's not a huge amount, so there's definitely better third stars. Overall, this one's a bit of a dud. Let's go on ahead and see what else we got. Okay. Oh, well, here we've got an Aristocrat Short Ultrasight Laser Pistol with 25% faster fire rate and plus 1 perception. So, for a moment, I thought we had a pretty good one here, at least potentially once the new patch comes where they're fixing the way that energy damage is calculated against energy resistance so that it'll be on par with physical damage, which will be a big boost to energy weapons. Unfortunately, this is the Ultra Sight Laser Pistol, not the Laser Pistol, which means that it does less damage than the regular Laser Pistol, which seems kind of silly to me, but that is the case. Who knows? Maybe they'll fix that in the next patch. I might hold on to this weapon until then. I'm not going to count on that. I would actually be kind of surprised if they do, but, who knows? I like to leave room for pleasant surprises. But the effects on this weapon are overall very good. The Aristocrats, as I talked about on the light machine gun, is, in my opinion, probably the best first star for full health builds. So, not much more to say about that. The 25% faster fire rate is, in my opinion, one of the very best second stars in the game, especially for particularly for weapons that can be made fully automatic. It doesn't tend to do a whole lot on semi-automatic weapons, but on fully automatic weapons, it is straight up a DPS increase, damage per second. It does not increase your damage per shot, but as long as you're accurate, it's still very good. And then the plus 1 perception, again, I'm not going to beat that one into the ground. Some more VATS accuracy. This is definitely the type of weapon that you could use in VATS even after making it fully automatic, so The effects on this weapon, very good. Unfortunately, it's an ultra sight, but like I said, I'll probably hold on to this one till after the patch to see what they do with the ultra sight laser pistols, if anything. So yeah, but let's go on ahead and move on to the next one here. Well, yeah, here we've got a troubleshooter's harpoon gun with 25% faster fire rate and faster movement speed while aiming. So the troubleshooter's effect is one of the more useful of the Slayer's effects, just because there are quite a few times in the game where you're likely to be fighting robots that you know for a fact that you're going to be going in to fight robots, such as when you run a nuke silo, run the encrypted event, and things like that. But also, the robots are not especially squishy the way most ghouls tend to be, so having some extra damage against them is not a bad thing at all. It may help you put them down quicker, and I could definitely see an argument being made that it could be worth keeping a weapon around specifically for dealing with robots. I don't think this is that weapon, but I still could see an argument made for that. The 25% faster fire rate, well, as I said in the last weapon, it's not particularly good on weapons that are semi-automatic, and I don't think it's really adding a whole lot to this weapon. So, unfortunately, it's really not the best weapon for this. These effects could be good for a different weapon for keeping around for dealing with robots, but this is definitely not the weapon you really want to see them on. And then faster movement speed while aiming. That is kind of a dud effect in my opinion. If you're running the speed dimming mutation, and I believe that most endgame players will be, then it's doing nothing at all for you. You're going to be moving just as fast while aiming without that effect as you will with that effect. So it's basically like not having a third star at all. If you don't have the speed demon mutation, and there's nothing wrong with not having that mutation if you don't want it, then it will do something for you, but I still question how frequently you're really going to be running around the battlefield while holding down the aim button. Maybe you're the type of player who does that a whole lot. If you are, I'd love to hear from you and have you let me know about that. I just don't imagine that there's a lot of players doing that, so, if you are, please educate me. But anyway, overall, I think this one's a bit of a dud, so let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Suppressor's Crusader pistol with plus 50% limb damage and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Suppressor's effect is kind of unexciting, primarily because I just don't see a lot of use for it in the game. There are the decryption daily ops where the enemies have 90% armor penetration, so they hit really, really hard, and being able to reduce their damage output could be a benefit in those situations, but I still think it's better to just put those enemies down quickly and reduce their damage output to 0 instead of reduce it to 75%. So, if you don't have a weapon or your build isn't built right, like your support build or something, to not be able to put them down that quickly, then a Suppressor's effect might be a little bit more appealing, but I think you're just better off trying to put them down quickly. Most of them aren't typically too tanky, although it really does depend on, which enemies they are and what effects they have, what mutations they have. So, anyway, the plus 50% limb damage, that is really an unexciting second star. It's probably one of my least favorite second stars because it's not horrible by any means. I mean, it doesn't do anything. Because for me anyway, if I'm going to be trying to cripple something, I'm going to be running the perks that give me a chance to cripple it and counting on that to do it, rather than just, count on this plus 50% limb damage effect to do it. For example, it is useful to cripple the wings on the Scorchbeast Queen, or even Scorchbeasts in general if you want them to land to make them easier to kill. But that said, yeah, the really just that second star is not very good. It can get some use out of it on a very fast-firing weapon with low damage per shot, because you'll have a high chance of crippling something before it actually dies. But most of the time, I kill things before they're crippled, so yeah. The third star, the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, that's very good, especially on a weapon like this, because The pistols in this game do tend to be a bit underpowered compared with really any other weapon in the game. And that's unfortunate. It would be nice if they could find some way to balance that out, but so far they have not. So if you're going to be using a pistol, you probably want to do some things to increase your damage output a little bit, or else you're just going to be kind of accepting that your damage is going to be subpar, which if you're using pistols, you're kind of accepting that anyway. I do have a pistol build, and I do have fun with them, but they're definitely not my most powerful build by any means. So getting some extra critical meters because your critical meter is filling faster, that will help bring a little bit of parity, but it won't get you all the way there, but it helps. So overall, this thing is not terribly exciting. It's not the worst, but it's probably going to go back to the Scrip machine. We've got 2 more tries here, so let's see what we can get. And here we got an an Aristocrat's Ultrasight Gatling Laser with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So this one was somewhat close to being a good one. The Aristocrat's effect, as I talked about before, is probably, at least in my opinion, the best first star for full health builds, next to anti-armor anyway. But the second star, bashing damage increased by 50%, for the vast majority of weapons in this game, it really does virtually nothing. If you've tried bashing enemies in this game, you've probably noticed that you've done very, very little damage when you do so. It's not none, but if you try to bash your enemies to death, you're going to be there all day per enemy. So there are ways you can increase that with perks and, this legendary effect, but even then, I think it's still going to be subpar at best. So there is one situation where the bashing damage increased by 50% is very good, and that's if you put the Shredder mod on the minigun and go around and use it as a melee weapon. If you do that, this second star is very good, but this is not a minigun, so that's not an option here. The plus 250 damage resistance while reloading, that's not one of my favorite third stars. It definitely has some use because getting some extra protection while you're reloading is a good thing, especially on a weapon like this. It's going to take a minute to reload because changing out those cores takes a moment. But with a weapon like this, you're also not going to be reloading that often, although because it is a core-based weapon, meaning it uses fusion cores instead of a typical magazine, then you're not really going to want to reload it in between fights the way you would with, say, a Fixer or a Handmade, because doing so is going to leave you with a whole bunch of half-charged fusion cores in your inventory, and that's just not something that I think anybody wants. So you generally, with a weapon like this, are going to run out your core, and that's going to potentially leave you reloading in the middle of battle. So that third star probably has a bit more utility on a weapon like this than it does on, say, a Handmade or a Fixer, but it's still not exciting because typically I think most players who would be using a weapon like this would be using power armor, so they would definitely have the 300 to 400 plus damage resistance already, to the point to where that 250 damage resistance that's added would be providing very, very diminishing returns. So overall, not the worst third star, but not exciting by any means. Good first star on this weapon, making it something that I could see a lower level player using for a while until they got something better, but overall, this one's probably going to be going back to the Scrip bin as well. And we got one more pull here, so let's see if we can get something good to finish out the day. And we did not. So we got a Ghoul Slayer's M79 grenade launcher with replenishing action points with each kill, and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So, I talked a little bit about the Ghoul Slayer's effect before, everything applies here, except that it's even less useful on a weapon like this because if you look at the base damage of the weapon, 222, and I'm not even running Demolition Expert at the moment, then you'll see that it's probably going to be putting out enough damage to kill most ghouls in one, at most 2 shots. So getting plus 50% damage to ghouls is not going to be doing a whole lot for you there. The replenishing action points with each kill, I could see that being useful on this, especially if you're pulling this thing out to deal with large crowds of enemies. You could potentially get back a whole bunch of AP at once, although with the slow firing nature of this weapon, I wonder if you could even actually use your AP fast enough to get it back in to benefit from all of it that you could get back from that. Possibly so if you're using dodgy and dashing around and things like that, but I think that's going to be kind of an edge case at best. Your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, that is kind of an interesting effect on this weapon because you could definitely use it in VATS to increase your accuracy and make sure you get hits on the target that you want. The big drawback to using VATS with a launcher weapon is that if you miss, you generally don't get any kind of an explosion from it. So it's a risk-reward kind of situation. Myself, if I'm running any kind of a launcher weapon, I kind of sometimes use VATS, but a lot of times I just aim down the sights since it's basically a heavy weapon in my mind, and I typically aim down sights for heavy weapons. You know, your mileage may vary, but overall, I think this one's a bit of a dud, so yeah, that's what we got today overall. We didn't do too bad. We got some interesting ones. We did get a very good one with the Aristocrat's Light Machine Gun that I do expect to see a Weapon Spotlight video on at some point in the future. So yeah, I'm not complaining today. And so please remember, if you enjoy content like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you any money. But yeah, we'll be back next week, and until then, I really appreciate you tuning in.